The summer sun was setting over our peaceful, suburban neighborhood when I first received the letter. It was from Karen, the president of our homeowners association. Karen had developed a reputation for being controlling, demanding, and excessively strict about the HOA rules. Most people kept their heads down to avoid conflict with her. Unfortunately, I was about to find out just how far she was willing to go. The letter stated in no uncertain terms that my newly built deck violated the aesthetics and uniformity standards of the community and had to be torn down within 30 days. I was stunned. The deck had been carefully constructed, approved by city permits, and built to code. It wasn't flashy or over the top, just a clean, sturdy wooden deck where my family could relax, grill dinner, and enjoy the evenings. I immediately called Karen, hoping to clear up what had to be a misunderstanding. Instead, the conversation turned heated. She insisted that my deck was unsightly, that it brought down the value of neighboring homes, and that it violated HOA standards. When I asked her to show me exactly where in the bylaws this supposed violation existed, she dodged the question. "Rules are rules," she snapped. "If you don't tear it down, we'll fine you daily until you comply. And trust me, you won't win if this goes to court." Her smugness lit a fire in me. I wasn't about to spend thousands of dollars demolishing a perfectly legal structure just to satisfy Karen's personal preferences. I contacted a few neighbors, and many of them admitted they thought Karen was overstepping her authority. Some had even faced her wrath before, but had chosen to comply out of fear. This time was different. I had every document to prove the deck was legal: building permits, HOA architectural approval records, and photographs showing that other homes had similar additions. Karen wasn't enforcing rules, she was enforcing her will. My wife urged me to stand firm, and my kids were heartbroken at the thought of losing the space where we planned birthday parties and family gatherings. That's when I decided if Karen wanted a fight, I would give her one. I refused to tear down the deck. Weeks later, another letter arrived. This time, it was more aggressive, threatening fines, liens on my home, and legal action. Karen had escalated the issue to a full-scale battle. I knew it was time to take her to court. Little did I know this fight would expose Karen's abuse of power and led to a ruling that would shake the very foundation of the HOA. Preparing for court wasn't easy. The HOA had a legal team on retainer, and Karen seemed determined to make an example out of me. She strutted around the neighborhood as if she'd already won, often stopping by just to remind me of the inevitable outcome. "You'll regret this," she sneered one morning as I watered my lawn. "The HOA always wins." I smiled politely but kept my silence. Inside, though, I was gathering evidence. I spent hours combing through the HOA bylaws, photographing every home in the neighborhood with a deck, patio, or modification similar to mine. The hypocrisy was undeniable. Karen herself had a backyard pergola that hadn't been approved by the HOA Architectural Committee. When I met with my attorney, she was shocked at how flimsy Karen's case really was. The bylaws allowed homeowners to apply for exterior modifications, and as long as they complied with safety codes and matched the character of the community, they were valid. My application had been approved by the committee months earlier, and I had a stamped copy of the approval letter. Karen's attempt to undo that decision was unlawful. We filed a countersuit against the HOA for harassment and abuse of authority. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood, and suddenly, neighbors who had once stayed silent started showing support. Some shared their own stories of Karen's bullying tactics, fines for leaving, garbage cans out too long, warnings for having holiday decorations up past January, even letters demanding people repaint fences that were perfectly fine. The day of the hearing finally arrived. Karen showed up in a sharp suit flanked by 2 attorneys. She carried herself like a queen entering her courtroom. She shot me a look of disdain as if she were certain I was about to be humiliated. But as the proceedings began, it quickly became clear that her case was weak. My attorney presented evidence of the permit approvals, photographs of similar structures, and the fact that Karen herself had unapproved modifications. The judge frowned more with each new piece of evidence. Karen tried to argue passionately, but her arrogance slipped through. She interrupted the judge, rolled her eyes at our attorney, and even suggested that community harmony depended on absolute compliance to her interpretation of the rules. By the end of the first day, It was clear this wasn't going the way Karen had expected. The judge scheduled a final hearing, and everyone in the courtroom could sense that Karen's confidence was starting to crumble. The second hearing was when everything unraveled for Karen. My attorney called witnesses, neighbors who testified that they, too, had faced Karen's unreasonable demands. One neighbor recounted being fined for planting the wrong color flowers. Another described being threatened with legal action over a small storage shed. Each testimony painted the same picture. Karen wasn't enforcing community rules. She was abusing her power. When the judge asked Karen to produce the exact bylaw my deck supposedly violated, her attorneys scrambled. They presented vague statements about aesthetics and uniformity, but none of it held up. My deck met all the written requirements. Then came the bombshell. My attorney revealed photographs of Karen's own pergola and outdoor modifications, none of which had been approved by the committee. The room went silent. The judge leaned forward, eyebrows raised. "Mrs. Jenkins," he said, addressing Karen formally, "are you telling this court that you enforce rules on your neighbors that you yourself do not follow?" Karen stammered. She tried to explain that her pergola didn't count because it was decorative, but the judge wasn't buying it. The hypocrisy was blatant. At that moment, Karen's carefully crafted authority began to crumble. Her confident demeanor faded, replaced by frustration and anger. She raised her voice, accused me of rallying the neighborhood against her, and even hinted that the judge was being unfair. That was a mistake. Judges don't take kindly to accusations of bias. Meanwhile, I remained calm. My attorney advised me to let Karen's temper do the damage, and it did. Each outburst only strengthened our case. By the time closing arguments arrived, Karen's side was flailing. They tried to argue that the HOA president had discretionary authority to interpret rules as she saw fit, but the judge firmly reminded them that bylaws must be applied consistently and fairly. Neighbors who had come to observe whispered to one another, shaking their heads at Karen's behavior. Some even smirked as her facade collapsed. For years she had ruled with an iron fist, and now everyone was watching her be exposed. As we left the courtroom that day, Karen avoided eye contact with me. She looked pale, her usual smugness replaced with fear. She knew she was losing, but none of us were prepared for the judge's final ruling. When the final day of court arrived, the tension was electric. Neighbors filled the benches, eager to hear the verdict. Karen sat stiffly at the plaintiff's table, her attorneys whispering frantically in her ear. I sat quietly with my attorney, heart pounding. The judge began by summarizing the case. The HOA claimed my deck violated community standards, while I argued it had been lawfully approved and built. He methodically reviewed the evidence, highlighting the inconsistencies in Karen's arguments, the proof of my compliance, and the testimonies of multiple neighbors. Then came the ruling. The court finds that the defendant's deck is in full compliance with all applicable HOA bylaws and city regulations. The HOA's demand for removal is baseless. Furthermore, the court finds evidence of harassment, selective enforcement, and abuse of authority by the HOA president. Gasps echoed through the room. Karen's face went pale. The judge continued. The HOA is hereby ordered to cease all harassment of the defendant regarding this matter. Additionally, the HOA will reimburse the defendant for legal fees incurred. Finally, this court recommends a vote of no confidence in the current HOA leadership to restore fairness and trust in this community. Karen's jaw dropped. She tried to speak, but the judge silenced her with a sharp look. "This ruling is final," he declared. The room erupted in murmurs. My neighbors smiled, some even clapping softly. Karen stormed out, her heels clicking angrily against the tile floor. For the first time, she was powerless. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood transformed. Neighbors who had once lived in fear of Karen's letters now felt free. We held a special HOA meeting, and in a near-unanimous vote, Karen was removed as president. A new board was elected, one focused on fairness, community spirit, and actual improvement rather than control. As for my deck, it became a symbol. Neighbors often stopped by to sit, talk, and celebrate the victory. What began as Karen's attempt to tear down my family's space turned into a unifying moment for the entire neighborhood. The judge's ruling didn't just protect my deck, it gave the community back its freedom. And as Karen's once feared voice faded into silence, we finally reclaimed the peace she had stolen for so long.